talks I've been giving on this text that I was given, this teachings. My background is in Tibetan Buddhism, and an important text in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is called Lojong. Lojong is Tibetan for mind training. And it was these instructions that were gathered, that were brought to Tibet by this Indian teacher, Atisha, and compiled into 7 chapters by this Tibetan master, Chekawa, and titled Mind Training, or Lojong, in 7 points, the 7 points of mind training. And in our tradition, we say that this text, these points are the path is, the complete path of Buddhism, of the Buddhist teachings. Because there's so many teachings that the Buddha gave, so many suttas, many different traditions we see, right? Zen, Tibetan Buddhist, Theravadan, Chan, Mahayana, Vajrayana, all these teachings. And we might think, wow, do they lead to different directions? Or there's all these different teachings, different schools, but they all they're like rivers leading to the ocean, to the same ocean. But because of different people, different propensities, different intelligence, different styles, how we absorb information, that's where the Buddha gave all these teachings, different teachings, and these different schools and lineages and traditions focus specifically on one aspect of the Buddhist teachings. But in Tibet, they compiled these 7 points of mind training, and with these 59, they call them 59 maxims or slogans, to kind of remind us to practice, remind us what it is to cultivate. So they're very simple, kind of like little quotes, little you could even say like little stickies that were, sometimes we don't want to read a book, we just want to read the little quote, right? The little message, the little bumper sticker, because perhaps we don't have time, to really to dedicate our time to reading, scholarly reading all this text that's available. And in Tibet, there was a tradition of nomadic people. So many of them didn't have a lot of education. They were nomads, farmers. So they compiled these very simple maxims, little slogans to help them to train. Train in cultivating an open heart and open mind, and specifically to train in diminishing ego clinging. If you're familiar with the Buddhist teachings, his first sermon was the Four Noble Truths. Are you familiar with the Four Noble Truths? There is suffering, there is a cause, there is a cessation, the good news, and there's a path, right? So that, you could say, is the essence of the Four Noble Truths is in here, in these teachings, in these little slogans. And the most important out of all these slogans is that second noble truth, that there is a cause. The cause of suffering is self-cherishing, self-importance, self-clinging. And that's up to us to really look at in meditation, in our practice of meditation, off of the cushion as we're going through life. How are we relating to reality, to our environment, to others? Is it always me? What about me? Or are we transforming that into others, being in service of others, thinking of others? So this is what the importance of these teachings are. And really all the teachings, the Buddhist teachings are self-clinging is the problem, is the cause of suffering, or self-cherishing. So the point that I'm on now is the 5th point. few months, I've gone through the first 4. The first was kind of like learning the preliminaries. The second chapter was cultivating of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is an open heart or open mind. Bodhi is awake, citta is heart or mind. So it's cultivating this open heart, open mind, bodhicitta. On the 5th point here, we're on, we've gone through many of the slogans, but now we're on the fifth chapter, which is the measure of mind training. And this consists of four maxims or 4 slogans. But this afternoon, I'll speak to the first 2 slogans here. The first one is, all Dharma teachings are for a single purpose. And the second is, rely on the better of the 2 witnesses. So there's many books on Lojong mind training from different teachers, different authors. If you're familiar with Trungpa Rinpoche, he had a famous one, Training in Compassion. Pema Chodron, if you're familiar with Pema Chodron, she has a book on mind training, Lojong, called Start Where You Are, I believe. So many different translations. The one that I've been reading from different ones, but also I've been focusing on this one, The Path of Awakening, that was written by my late teacher, Shamar Rinpoche. So, and this is what was transmitted to me, so I really like to emphasize on this book a little bit, because this was what was given to me, what was transmitted to me, so I would like to pass it on to you as best I can. So, the measure of mind training, so like I said, we're on the 5th point here, so now the measure of mind training, now the practitioner kind of looks into, okay, how am I using these slogans, these reminders to diminish self-clinging, to practice loving kindness, compassion for others, or am I still kind of really the emphasis is me? What about me? What am I getting out of this? So this is to measure our progress in a way. Sometimes we say well, what's the point? What am I doing this for? So this is kind of to measure where we're at. In practicing these teachings, cultivating. So Rinpoche says here, the 5th point gives you the yardstick to gauge your progress in practice. The best evidence of success in mind training is when you can spontaneously use whatever it is that you are doing to subdue self-clinging. When that arises naturally and effortlessly, it is a true sign that you have accomplished the results of mind training. In other words, mind training has become your nature. At this point, great wisdom will shine spontaneously and as naturally as the light of the sun grows from dawn to noon. So the first maxim here, all Dharma teachings are for a single purpose. Rinpoche says, the Buddha taught the Dharma for one purpose, to diminish self-clinging. When you are no longer absorbed by self-concern, that is the first measure of success in Lojong. Successful practitioners know differently than others. They naturally know whether ego is dominating or not, whether it is increasing, diminishing, or remaining the same. For them, mind training has become a habit of mind, and the ego is in check. As soon as an obstacle appears due to self-clinging, it is recognized and not followed. A non-practitioner cannot imagine having that kind of awareness, let alone trying to control self-clinging. So, we're practitioners. We're practicing the Dharma. We're practicing meditation. Meditation has many, as I mentioned earlier, it's a practice not exclusive to Buddhism. Many different spiritual traditions have use the practice of meditation, but for different purposes. But in Buddhism, the specific purpose of sitting practice, meditation practice, is to look at the mess, as you mentioned, not to get into the state of a trance, escapism in a way, Even though, I mean, people use that, you know, meditation, sometimes people come to meditation to relieve some stress, you know, settle down, kind of get away from the noise, from the kids, whatever, you know, we use meditation for that, and perhaps it helps, you know, perhaps it kind of gives us some ease, grounds us, kind of restores us, resets us, okay. But eventually that comes back, the mess comes back, right? So we're dealing with the symptoms, we're not dealing with the illness, you know? We're dealing just with the symptoms. But if we don't get to the bottom of it, to the root, the symptoms will appear again, right? So Buddhist practice, as it says here, you know, the Dharma teachings are for a single purpose. That single purpose is to diminish, as Rinpoche said, this self-clinging. That is the root of the problem. That is the fourth noble truth, the cause of suffering. You know? Buddha didn't say, there is suffering, there is a cause. It's Travis. You know? It didn't say it's out there. Buddha said the cause of your suffering is that somebody made you angry, that somebody's on your case, that somebody, you know, broke up with you. That he didn't say that. Right? Buddha said there's suffering and there's a cause. The cause is self-clinging, attachment to a idea of a self, that there is a self. You know? So that is the point. You know, as he says here to Rinpoche, which is, this really stuck to me, as soon as an obstacle appears due to self-clinging, that obstacle only appears due to self-clinging, meaning I see an obstacle. That's an obstacle for me. So that self-clinging sees it. This, I don't want this. You know? In reality, in truth, there is no obstacle. If there was an obstacle, if I see it's an obstacle for me, perhaps for Travis, it's not an obstacle. It's like, no problem. What's your problem? You know? But that if it was an obstacle, a true obstacle, it would be an obstacle for everybody. Everybody would recognize it as that. It would affect everyone in the same way. But it doesn't, right? We can see that. And that's what our meditation practice does, sitting in practice. This is what we're looking at. As soon as an obstacle appears due to self-clinging, a practitioner recognizes it and does not follow it. So this is what we're cultivating in formal practice of meditation. You know, when we see the mess, we might see, oh, an obstacle, and we're entangled in that, trying to get it to go away, and forgetting to just come back to the breath. Don't follow it, as he says. Recognize, we don't follow, we come back. You know, we can come back to the breath, or we can just let it be. Let the mess be. That's the second stage as we develop, as I mentioned, stability in concentration. At first, it's difficult because the habit, as he also says, you know, practitioner has developed a different habit of recognizing and letting go. You know. We have to recognize before we let go what we're letting go of. You know, we have to see it. So that's what we're doing when we're cultivating, from the Buddhist perspective, meditation practice. That's what we're doing. We're not practicing to really, you know, to be stress-free, to have some peace and quiet for a little bit. You know, we're getting to the bottom. We're uprooting. You know, we're not just dealing with the symptoms, working with the symptoms. We're getting to the root of the illness, which is self-clinging, that causes us suffering. And we can see that in our meditation practice, right? As I mentioned, using the Mass, you know, if we're just disturbed by that. but nothing is happening. It's just an appearance in the mind. So the same thing when we think about something that disturbed us last week, and we think about it right now, we're like, oh man, I was so mad. We can even physically feel, but nothing's happening, right? But that disturbance is because of the self-clinging. I don't like that. I didn't like that. And it's irritating us again. So that self-clinging, that territory, that reference point. So all Dharma teachings for a single purpose. That's that slogan, to remind us that the single purpose is that to diminish our self-clinging. What about me? What's in it for me? I, me, mind. I don't care about them. As long as it doesn't affect me, I'm fine. Always, if we really reflect on that and observe, there's always a strong sense of a self. And it doesn't mean that we don't identify with ourselves. Jampa, Travis, Nubia. We have these labels. This is how we maneuver. We go through the world. But just as I said, thoughts aren't the problem. The same thing. Self isn't the problem unless there's a clinging, a strong identification with that. That causes us to be uncomfortable, to be angry, jealous, prideful, ignorance. But ignorance doesn't mean really unintelligent or dumb. Ignorance has, if we really kind of break the word down, it has a flavor of ignoring. Ignorance, ignoring. We're ignoring the reality that there is no self, the true self, if we investigate and look. It's just composed from parts. As we were meditating, I was thinking of, the body. I was talking about the posture of the body, right? Even the body is just a label. Right? There's no such thing as body. It's just a label. It's composed of parts, right? If I cut my finger off and threw it in the patio back there and somebody found it, would they say, oh, look at that body? They would just say, look at that finger. So that spontaneity, that kind of effortless insight comes from our meditation practice. So even when we were sitting here, and I was explaining, the body, the posture, then this came to mind for me. Body, that's a composite. There's no such thing as a body. But somebody might say, what do you mean there's no such thing as a body? I see you, I have this, yes, relatively, yes. But ultimately, if you break it down in the same way, it's the self. The sign fell down. Huh? Yes. See that the sign went like, what? Oh no! His mind just exploded. No self, no sign. But that's the specific quality of Buddhist practice, of Buddhist meditation, is to look, inquire, look into that. The self, as they say, it's just a composite. The idea of a self, the idea of Jampa, it's just feelings, sensations, form, consciousness. And then the second verse, or second maxim slogan here is, rely on the better of the two witnesses. And my teacher says here, in general, we speak of two witnesses, self and others. Always rely on yourself as a chief witness. You know whether you are training and abiding by the commitments. Only you know the impact mind training has on you, on how you conduct yourself. The methods ground you in perfect motivation, and the training guides you towards perfect behavior. Therefore, when you are naturally and effortlessly acting properly, it means your practice is successful. You will have no regrets. So relying on the two witnesses, so he says self and other. So again, this is a measure, of practice. We're studying this, we're cultivating this. Our behavior might be a certain way, and somebody might give us praise or something. Say, what a good practitioner this person is, But are we really, That's why we rely on the first witness with us, which is us. We know our minds. We know if we're practicing. We know what our motivation, our intention is of why we're doing these practices. Why we're practicing loving kindness, compassion, generosity. Is it an effortless, a spontaneous activity, and for the well-being of others, of all beings? All beings includes us, in our practice. Or is it motivated by hope and fear, expectation, looking good, getting a status, or just to collect, intellectually collect teaching so we can, express it to someone else, So this instruction here, rely on the better of the two witnesses, which is us. So that's a measure of how our mind training is going, how we are training our mind. Don't rely on on others, the compliments of others, or even, if somebody criticizes us because we, something that we didn't work out, so we're criticized. Don't rely on that witness. Rely on the primary witness with us, which is us. Know our intention. Know your motivation. If we're assured of that, what our intention was, our motivation was to help, then that's good enough, And if our activity in doing that work caused some harm, then we work to repair it, But if we're criticized and it gets us down, and then I'll never do this again, forget it doesn't work. Everything I try to do, nobody likes. What does that mean? Everything I do, nobody likes. It's self-clinging. It wasn't effortless, spontaneous, without, a self-reference. It was just an activity with a motivation and the intention to help others, to help. So as long as we know our intention, our motivation was aligned with that, we're the first witness, we know. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, these first two here, these two maxims. And I also have these practice advice from this other teacher that was also has a compilation of these slogans. So all dharmas agree at one point, meaning that self-clinging, that is the importance. Every teaching that the Buddha gave, it's the point is to diminish our self-cherishing, self-interest, self-clinging. And the practice tip for that from this teacher, she says, as you go about your day, try to pay attention to the points when your solid sense of separateness is provoked. Duality, separate, self and other. Notice the thoughts and sensations that arise with the reactions, such as defensiveness or territorialness. So notice when you feel defensive, territorial. And then pay attention to the thoughts and sensations arise when something has drawn you out beyond your self-absorption. So that's the tip. Notice when you're beginning to self-cling. I don't like that. And just notice. That's important. We don't want to push it away. We don't want to ignore it, right? We want to see. I always tell people the most important thing is to look at our state of mind. Not, something disturbed us, something's happening. Don't put so much importance on the external. Look at our state of mind. Is there, defensiveness, territorialness, self-cherishing, protective, right? Going into a cocoon. Or can we be drawn out of that self-clinging into this openness, this open state? That's bodhicitta. An awakened heart, awakened mind, that's the bodhicitta. So that's the tip, of all dharmas agree on one point, diminish self-clinging. So throughout our day, notice when we are defensive or offended, territorial, jealous, prideful, angry. And notice if we can, the first step is to notice. And when you notice that you've catch. Can we release? Can we open the hand? Or do we stay clenched? And that's our practice. This is what we're cultivating. If we're practicing mind training and we're cultivating it, putting it into action, actualizing it, that's the release part. Mind training doesn't mean everything is going to be goody-goody and nice, It means we just recognize when there's self-clinging, when we catch and we don't let go. And then the second slogan was, in this translation, of the two witnesses, hold the principal one. So which is us, right? We are the principal witness. And she says, a tip for practice, pay attention to the loneliness of experience. Notice the difference between seeking for confirmation and just direct witnessing, direct experience. What makes you trust or distrust your own experience? So those are the tips for rely on the primary witness.